So now we're going on to the word tankie. This word needs to die. It's ridiculous. Vaush talks about it in this clip.
These people all the time. So I've talked about this in the past, but when I describe a tankie, what I'm usually saying is an authoritarian whose aesthetic interests lean towards Soviet or communist aligned countries who are principally interested in opposition to American political hegemony rather than a positive interest in certain ideological positions. So one thing that I've noticed...
Okay, we'll pause there before Vaush gets to his observation, whatever the fuck it's going to be. Just to say, let me read that back. I think I got the whole thing. Quote, a tankie is an authoritarian. What is an authoritarian? I mean, objectively, what is that? We don't know. We don't know. Vaush has his bourgeois liberal ideas about freedom and liberty. What does it mean in this context? We don't know. Vaush is just making shit up. An authoritarian whose aesthetic interests. Their aesthetic interests? What are you talking about? Like, what is an aesthetic interest? What color lipstick they wear? What are you talking about? How they accessorize? What is this? An authoritarian whose aesthetic interests lean towards Soviet or communist-aligned countries who are principally interested in opposition to American hegemony. That's not a bad thing, by the way, either being communist-aligned or opposing American hegemony, rather than a positive interest in certain ideological interests. What the fuck does that last part mean? What are certain ideological interests? Vaush doesn't say. Maybe he will say in a minute. But let's read the whole thing back. An authoritarian, quote unquote, which, by the way, in socialist society, authority does not disappear, it merely changes form. This is just true of society. You can't just do whatever the fuck you want at all times. You can't. All right? Whose aesthetic interests, that's a head scratcher to me, I don't know, lean towards Soviet or communist aligned countries, not a bad thing, who are, and if they are, Vaush doesn't say why, who are principally interested in, okay, I mean, I could nitpick principally because you're saying that it's wrong to have that as your, like, guiding principle. I don't know. I mean, sort of is the dominant issue in the world today, arguably. Principally interested in opposition to American hegemony. Well, the U.S. does lead imperialism as we know it today. It is, provides most of the military might and the political leadership of imperialism. So it's the largest economy, etc. Rather than a positive interest in certain ideological interests. So again, what those ideological interests are, we don't know, so you can't really debate whether that's better or worse than being principally interested in bringing down US-led imperialism. We don't know. So I'm going to stick to bringing down US-led imperialism is a good thing. So I don't, Vaush hasn't made the case here. An authoritarian, to me, I mean, what does that mean? Somebody who's willing to use force to, authority is institutionalized power. Power has a close relationship with force, sort of the potential versus the actualized form of each other. So, okay, somebody who's willing to use authority to try to bring down U.S. imperialism. Is like, what exactly is wrong with that? And then rather than a positive interest in stuff that Vaush likes, which that's how I'm translating certain ideological interests, certain things that this man baby thinks are more important